Hi everyone and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm here with Cathy Lewis, who is the president of CS Lewis Publicists, who are a boutique publicist firm who target non-fiction authors. So thank you, Cathy, for joining the call with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a bit about your backgrounds and how you got into publicity.
Okay, well, prior to forming this company, I worked in publishing for 7 years. I worked with a small publishing company and was involved with all aspects of marketing, distribution, even kind of determining which books we would publish. But my main function was publicity and media outreach. So after doing that work for 7 years, I sensed that I would do better on my own, working with authors individually, because when you work with a publicity company, you're literally, and you will find this if you're an author right now working with a publicity company, that you are one of many authors that a publicist is promoting. So when you work with a company like ours, you're getting very one-on-one, direct strategies, and the level of service is just extremely different. So I formed this company in 1996 and working with nonfiction authors in all genres. I did self-help, I did spirituality, I did business, health, really pretty much everything nonfiction, a little bit memoir, not that much. And it just ballooned into, now I've been going for 26 years. So
Nice. So I think a lot of people, especially authors, maybe they're not so business minded and they hear the word publicist and PR and these sort of terms and they think of quite corporate, biz people working in big offices. So could you tell me a bit more about what the role of a publicist is especially
Sure.
for non-fiction authors?
Well, publicity literally means making information public. So once you have a book, the most important thing is for people to hear about that book in hopes that they'll be interested in your information that you have and will ultimately buy your book. So as publicists, we are doing outreach with the media, which includes online publications, magazines, podcasts, radio, television, and getting the media to take an interest in your book, whether by interviewing you or writing an article about you, taking an article from you in all variety of ways.
Yeah, okay. And so the publicist, your role is you've got a lot of contacts with people who work in these media companies like newspapers,
Exactly.
blogs, that sort of thing, and you can put people's forward for being selected to be interviewed, for example.
Exactly.
Right, okay. So when an author is working with you to do that publicity, how does that relationship work? Is it you give them tasks to do that they would to get that publicity, or is it hands off and you take the work away from them?
No, it's a combination. Our team, we're a small boutique firm. There's 5 of us, and we are kind of a brain trust of skills. People who are researching new contacts, people who know how to write the perfect headline, people who know how to develop the perfect pitch, people who are really good at pitching. So it's a variety of skills that it takes to achieve getting a placement. So we have those skills. That said, we do work intimately with our authors. We tell them content that needs to be created. We have a lot of requests from editors for published content or opinion pieces. So we help the author in that process. The author is busy doing the media essentially that we get for them. So if there's a Q&A and an editor emails over some questions, or there's a podcast and they're doing that interview online just like this, or they're doing a television in studio, any of those things. So the authors are very busy and we help them in the process, but we essentially do the strategy and come up with the ideas and do the majority of the legwork.
Yeah, there's quite a few things there. There's like the TV, all those different types of media you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Are there what are the most important ones, do you think, for people who are maybe just starting out to focus on?
Well, it depends. If you're an author and it's your first book and nobody knows who you are, it's a little bit different than if you're someone and maybe it's your third book and you have a niche audience. Everybody comes into the process in a different place. So some authors might have a very developed website with a blog that's well read and a newsletter and a strong social media following. So if you're coming in and you have nothing, you have to begin by developing some of those absolutely essential items. So the main thing is developing a website. And that website should have an active blog. It could have an active newsletter. It can have a way that when people go to your website, people sign up so you can gather names and develop a list. And that list is eventually people you can market your book to. If you're having an event, these are people who, a virtual event, they might attend that event. If you're going to be in a city, you might reach out to that list and let those people know if you're going to be doing speaking. So having that website is kind of the critical thing. Then from there, you definitely do want to develop your social media. So whether that be, the first thing I would say is develop a strong LinkedIn profile, because LinkedIn is really about business. Now, if your book is a book that's health oriented, for instance, Facebook is very good for things of that nature because they have all of these different communities that are very specific. For instance, if it's a book about special diets for children, there's going to be a million groups of like parents and health professionals and all different things that you can connect with on Facebook. And Facebook allows you to put content that is, and for instance, if you have an article that's been published or a blog you wrote, you can put that on Facebook. Instagram is something that's very oriented toward images. So if you're good with images and putting a little slogan or even doing a little video of yourself, Instagram is good. But for just pure written contact, I think Facebook is better. Something like TikTok is excellent for reaching people, but it is a huge amount of work. And you really have to be disciplined to create these videos and connect with how TikTok thinks about things, because it isn't just promoting your thing, it is using their themes and their ideas. But they do have a good book community on TikTok. So it is
Yeah.
something to look into. And if you're interested, is we don't get that involved with it, but it is something authors can do. The other thing authors can do, if, for instance, say your book was just published and there are reviews on in different places, you can interact with those reviews and let readers know that you're there and you're engaging with them. The other thing with Facebook too is that you it is, the thing about social media is it is social. It isn't a megaphone. So if and something with health, if you have advice for people, people are going to come to you. Well, my child has this allergy, and should we feed him peanuts or whatever? So it is good to engage with readers initially, especially if you don't have a lot of outreach. Every author is very different in how they want to engage with the public. Another thing, a good thing to do is book events. There's different book events in different cities. There are book events you can do that are virtually, where you set up, where you're talking about your topic. Again, this would really depend. If you're a business author, things like this are very effective. So there's a variety of things that authors can do. It's literally a cornucopia of endless things an author can do once they have their book.
Yeah, there's so many things. You just thinking about all those different methods you talked about. I mean, it's quite overwhelming, which I guess is why it helps so much to work with publicists like you. So if someone is new to one of your new clients, for example, what does that process look like when you take them on? What steps do you go through to understand about their book, and what would be the most effective thing for them?
So, assuming an author hires us, a first time author, most likely that author is going to have a website at that point.
Yeah.
So, the thing about promoting books in the climate that we exist in right now is that there is a lot of onus on the authors to be very involved. It's not just like the old days where a reporter would interview you and a story would be syndicated on Associated Press and be in 100 newspapers across the country. That's how it was, but it is no longer like that. So what we do is we go through the book and we pick out all the angles, whether they be evergreen angles or topical angles. We give assignments to the author, and we can do this in conjunction with the author as well, because they're the experts on their topic. So what our initial goal with an author, and especially a nonfiction author in business, in self-help, in health, is to build their thought leadership and their brand. So people hear these words over and over, and it almost sounds stale, but it really just means letting people know who you are, and you're knowing who your identity is and what your core messages are. So we help an author come up with that messaging. So once we get that together in the form of press materials, then we start our outreach to the media. Once we start our outreach to the media, we're in contact with the authors setting up that media, and things happen fairly rapidly. It's a very rapid fire media environment. It's not like the old days when you would mail a book and something would have things are very quickly. A lot of things are very quick. So our goal is to create a lot of buzz for a book. So once that buzz starts to be created, whether an article appears by the author in an online magazine, or an interview is written with that author, or a podcast comes out, that then becomes collateral for that author to use on their social media, to put on their website, to send out in their newsletters and let people know what is happening with that book. So the combination of all of those things happening, and then perhaps the author might be doing some public speaking. So all of this is happening because of the efforts of our team. And then the author starts building their network from that. And that's how you begin,
Yeah.
essentially.
The bit you just mentioned at the start there was about sorting your core message out, so making sure that's really clear. Um,
Mhm.
what would that core message look like? Is it usually a couple of sentences? And do you have any good examples of one that's maybe worked?
Well, we do pitches that are the big idea of the book and why should you care.
Yeah,
So when we're doing this messaging, it's really about reaching the media. What is a producer? Why are they going to open that email? So you really want to give them something that is interesting, that's not necessarily clickbaity, but something that, because we do work with a lot of the editors over and over in a lot of the same contexts. So we know what they like. So with every book, that is going to be extremely different. In terms of core messaging, that is something that is a little bit like branding. So I really don't have a good example at the top of my head to pull out. I should have actually thought of that beforehand. But that is something that the author, for instance, if they're doing an interview, they might have three core ideas about their book, three sound bites. So an example of one in politics would be like when Bill Clinton ran, it's the economy stupid.
yeah,
So anytime Bill Clinton was on TV, that would come up. So he had three sound bites like that. And politics works like that a lot. They just have this core messaging and they repeat that core messaging over and over. So with books, it's not as rigid, but it's fairly similar. There
yeah,
will be things that an author is going to be asked similar questions in a variety of interviews. We can provide those questions to producers and people who do podcasts. Sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't. But an author will have a sense,
yeah,
of what are the three, it's not necessarily selling points, but the things about, if someone's talking about corporate culture does not start from the top. It is everybody working together or whatever. I mean, we do such a variety of books and they all have different messaging, but that's essentially how it works.
it's really important for non-fiction authors, especially, to have that messaging. I think because when people search for non-fiction books, often they don't know who the author is, and maybe they're searching for like a particular keyword, which essentially is going to be a problem they're having. Usually,
Mhm.
a non-fiction book should be answering a question. So, for example, you just gave there corporate culture. Like people probably don't search for a book just called corporate culture. What they're really looking for is how they can fix their team. How they can have a happier team, for example. So that would be the key takeaway from that. Is that the sort of thing you mean? That sort of message that the reader
Exactly.
will get answered. Yeah.
I mean, there's some topics, like we did a book, The Genius of Empathy.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, and she could talk about empathy in relationship to the division of the country. She could talk about it in relationship to health. You could talk about it in relationship to relationships. So, depending on what market you're trying to reach, sometimes those messages change a little bit.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I teach a lot of people who are writing their own non-fiction books, and I help them maybe with some of the parts, especially on Amazon. And a lot of people have these great ideas, but it isn't tied down to a particular target audience, which makes a book like about empathy. That's quite a big topic. It could be targeted at anyone. If you're thinking about who that
Exactly.
target audience is, that's going to become really important for getting to the right audience.
Right. And that would be something more we would do than the author per se. The authors generally have a specific audience that they're writing to.
Mm.
And sometimes we can pull out how to make that information relevant to, if say they're writing a business book that's tied more to corporate media, corporations, and then we retweak it and target it to entrepreneurs or target it to people just starting a small business or target it to women in business.
Yeah,
All these different things we can do so that the book can reach a wider audience. We call it kind of niches and pitches, different areas that an author can reach, whether it's gender or age or work, entrepreneurs, whatever.
yeah. Do you have any examples of some of the more exciting and successful campaigns or publicity events you've run that have been really effective for authors?
Well, I mean, obviously, what comes to mind is a book that was a major bestseller, literally
Okay,
millions. So that the book, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. All right. The book is called Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John
okay, yeah,
Perkins.
I've heard it. Yeah,
And so that book came out and was a multi-million copy bestseller. And then he redid the book, just adding more information. Then it came out again like a few years ago, and then again. So every time it comes out, you're kind of reaching new people. The book is an incredible story, and it's a kind of book where you pick it up and you really can't put it down. So that's why the book is a bestseller. And it is a book that was about economics, it's about politics, it's about the environment. So it was a campaign that he'd be on everything from Democracy Now! To regional television shows to Fortune magazine, just really the gamut of top tier and mid tier media, Common Dream, because he really had a huge amount of things to say in a variety of ways.
yeah. And what sort of publicity events did you do that made it particularly successful?
Well, I think the publicity made it successful. His name made it successful.
Hmm.
He did do a lot of regional book signings. So this is the book tour is something that's a little bit old school. And I'd only recommend it for authors with people know your name.
Hmm.
So he would go into bookstores in Portland, or we would set these up, Miami, New York, Washington, D.C., big bookstores like Politics and Prose, Books and Books, bookstores that people know, and do these signings and literally get hundreds of people that would come.
Yeah,
But a lot of people will do book signings in their local area and really have no one come. So they're really not that effective if you're just starting out, unless you're someplace where you know people to invite and they're going to come. But for somebody like that, or somebody like a Judith Orloff, who wrote The Genius of Empathy, she is a 4 times New York Times bestselling author. I've done all of her books, and she would go across the country and do book signings. She would do talks, and everything from Unity churches to things like Omega and Crapalo, any big kind of spiritual New Age center. And the combination of her doing those big events, her doing the book signings, her getting a ton of publicity, that resulted in and the other big element that people don't really discuss enough is, does your book have distribution in bookstores, or is your book just on Amazon?
mm,
And in many cases these days, books are not distributed in bookstores. And the reality is that in the days when they were, there would be this thing we'd call the stumble upon factor, where people
yes,
would hear you on the radio, and they might see a few things about you. It's like when you're listening to NPR in your car and you hear an author and like, oh, I'm going to buy that book. And then you get home and then you completely forget about it. So when people walk into a bookstore, they see the book and they're like, oh, I remember reading about this. So it just
Yeah,
had this huge impact on book sales. And in the old days, publishers could predict by their pre-orders, exactly how many books they would sell. It was much easier to sell large amounts of books through bookstores. So now many books, especially self-published books and books that are by small publishers, are really just online.
yeah,
So that means that when people go on Amazon, they are basically not shopping. They know what they're going to buy. And I think people do look at maybe the top 20 in certain genres or whatever, but it's not a browsing experience. So it's much harder to sell a book in this climate because of that. And for publishers too, publishers are really struggling.
yeah, yeah. I know. Amazon is a completely different game in terms of book sales because I speak to a lot of people who want to get that kind of Amazon bestseller badge, and it's kind of irrelevant because
Mhm.
most people on Amazon, as you're right, they're shopping, they're looking for keywords, they're looking for particular things, they want an answer to a problem, and then they're going to find it. So people don't generally browse using those tables and categories in the same way as people would shop like normally in a bookshop, for example.
Exactly.
So how does how's publicity changed, bearing that in mind? With people buying stuff on Amazon.
Well, because our goal is to get publicity, which
Yeah,
means we're getting exposure in the media. So our goal is not marketing, which means those actions which make someone buy a book. Publicity does help people buy a book, but it's really indirect. It's not somebody getting an email in their inbox in an email marketing campaign to a specific list where someone might buy a book and you can track it in that very kind of concrete way, like this marketing effort resulted in 50 sales. With publicity, you can't do that because you don't know necessarily. People might read an article but might not buy a book.
yeah,
But so it is prior to this time when Amazon existed and all of that, there was a much more of a direct correlation between publicity and book sales. Literally, publishers all the books would be in the bookstore, and the goal was the publicity would happen between 1 and 6 months. And if those books weren't sold, they were sold by the efforts of publicity, those books were returned. So there was a huge pressure to get publicity in that time period. So now because people have to go on Amazon, it's more about the author. This is why social media and all the things that authors do is so important. It's the term again, building your thought leadership and your brand. What that does is make people love what you do, love your information, love you enough so that they will go to Amazon and buy your book. And they might just start by signing up for your newsletter, or they might be just following you on social media because I have some clients who do incredible social media that's very engaging and they're putting stuff up there every day. And not everybody can do that or even wants to do that. So the big difference is that the authors who do those things, it does impact their sales
yeah,
because
definitely. Yeah.
people are, but it's literally the author has to be almost like a salesperson now.
What the people that are posting stuff on social media what sorts of things, especially for books, have you seen that's gone viral that's really helps the most with that publicity?
I don't know if anything's gone viral. What happens is I have like some psychologists who are on social media. Um, they connect with a group. They just have their own little following,
Hmm.
and that continues to grow. So they find people in a niche, and then they bring people into their virtual seminars or their virtual book events, or they consult with people. So a lot of people are doing a book to have people hire them. So
Yes.
whether it be a business consultant, and that's with a lot of our business clients, that's the main thing they're concerned about. They want people to hear about them, so they'll hire them. It's not so much about their buying the book. And literally then say they are hired then to be a consultant at Google, then they can go into Google and do events and sell a lot of books in that way. So it's really different for a business author than it is, say, for a fiction author, and it's very different for somebody who's maybe a parenting author. And there are a lot of parenting communities online. So that's why you kind of have to map out the strategy based on what your topic is and who you're trying to reach.
That's really interesting about the communities online because a lot of people I speak, a lot of the people I speak to who are writing their books, I say to them, try and find these newsletters and Facebook groups where people are talking about your exact topic, because they're your target audience. They're the people that they want to be buying stuff. If you can start posting and they're building a relationship with these people, you've got people who are already, warm leads, and they're going to want to buy your books in future. Is that something that you work with authors with as well, or not?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that, for instance, here is one way in which some authors have gone viral by amplifying through other influencers. So, for instance, you have content and somebody's writing about the future of EV, electric vehicles, and how the next presidency is going to impact it. So we just had an author, for instance, write an article about that. So then they see there's some big influencer, for instance, on LinkedIn, and they might write an article with a contrarian opinion. You can post in their LinkedIn, and then maybe your article gets amplified to their much bigger audience. So that is something that, again, we are not social media experts. We're providing the collateral for people to do that. We can connect you with social media experts, but this is ways that things go viral, is connecting with other people who help boost your message, or just having something that is just extremely fun and interesting. It's like on a TikTok, the Be Demure. Yeah. I mean, just something strange like that, goes viral. And
Yeah, it's weird. You've got to keep on top of things, and that was going to be my last question, actually. So, what were some of the trends you see that are going to change the future of how publicity? Because I think people, especially if they're just starting out with trying to get that publicity in the first place, you kind of want to jump on some of that, those new things that are coming out for books. So, are there any new trends that are in the world of publicity that you think people should be aware of?
well, I think AI is definitely going to affect everything, because people can generate Instagram campaigns on AI. They can generate content on AI. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a good thing, because the question is how authentic will one's voice be? But that is definitely going to have an influence.
Yeah.
I think there is a comeback of the local bookstore.
Okay.
And they kind of had gone out of business, and now there's like a resurgence of local bookstores, and they become places where people also hang out and do a lot of events. So that can have a big impact, because it's a place to connect with people. I think people want to connect in the flesh, not just online. I think that's really important. So that could conceivably be a little bit of a trend. I see it a little bit happening around here. We literally have 4 regional new regional stores that are independent bookstores in this
Right.
area, and a new one just came up.
Could be interesting for
Um,
people who are concentrating on maybe like quite local publicity. Like, if you're somewhere local to a particular area, you're much more likely to get those people come in. And one of the people I was
exactly.
working with once actually wrote a kids book with their daughter, who was like 8 or something, and they did a book signing in their local bookstore with the daughter like signing the books that she'd written, and she actually made like 100 sales on that one day, which was amazing.
Yeah, if you have something very relatable like that, like something with pets or something that, yeah, things like that can be great. I mean, a dry business book on supply chain management probably is not going to do well at your local bookstore, but
Yeah, you're probably right there. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I think that gives people a really good overview of like publicity and how it works. It's been really interesting to chat to you. There's been some great tactics I think people take away. If people want to
yeah,
get
so
in touch,
there is a little blog on my website that talks about how to do DIY publicity. So if people just go to cslewispublicity.com, they can read that blog. And there's other helpful information and blogs as well that can help new authors. It answers probably any question they might have.
great. Yeah, we'll put links to that blog in the show notes, because I read that before we did this show and it was really good. So definitely check that out if you're interested in starting publicity. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do it? Do you have social media, or is it just go straight to your website?
Go straight to my website.
Great.
They literally has my email. They should just email me. That's the most direct way.
Yeah, perfect. And just the final question is, what's a book that you recommend that everyone should be reading at the moment?
You wanted a self-published book, correct?
Doesn't have to be self-published. It can be any book. Most people have said books that have kind of helped them out with their writing journey. So most of them are
Well,
self.
A friend and networking publicist of Joanne McCall wrote a book, Media Darlings. So that is a good DIY publicity book for people to read if they want
Okay.
more information.
And what's that book about? Is it just all about how you can get publicity as a book writer?
Exactly.
Oh, great. Okay, I haven't heard that one, so that's really interesting. And what's the name of that? Was Joanne McCall?
Joanne McCall is the author, correct?
Brilliant. Oh, thanks for sharing something new. I didn't know that one. But yeah, brilliant. It was great to chat to you, and we'll speak again soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximise your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalised ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.